This series is about possibility, and we're taking it to City Hall. But before that, we understand you have to build awareness, and you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's been the biggest challenge when it comes to middle housing. Most people just don't know. We also need to understand what are some of the challenges when it comes to middle housing. And this is where we bring it to council. We'll see how we talk with Courtney Walcott, who helped develop and build the housing strategy, and excited to figure out what it's going to take to actually get more middle housing built, not only here in Calgary, but across Canada.
I'm Courtney Walcott, and I'm running to be your Ward 8 City Councilor. Calgary was already hurting. Downtown is half empty, we're facing an affordable housing crisis, and we have all been facing increasing uncertainty as the world changes around us. We need to find creative and innovative solutions to our infrastructure problems. On October 18th, join me and thousands of others as we vote for the future of Calgary. I'm Courtney Walcott, and I'm running to be your Ward 8 City Councilor.
Walcott is the first black man elected to Calgary City Council, and at 31 is the youngest member of council.
What's up, man? Good to see you, dude. Yeah, thanks for doing this. Excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
Here to talk housing, which you didn't know a lot about, I don't think, until you got here. Yeah, but now you're an expert. Yeah, episode 2 back here with Courtney Walcott, one of my favorite dudes, Councilor Walcott. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it. So,
happy to do it.
Yeah, well, we're gonna start just for you to tell us a bit about, your journey, where you came from. I was just telling you off camera, I was a bit of a hater when I heard you were gonna run for councilor. So I wanna acknowledge that I was wrong. I've been pleasantly surprised and motivated by everything you've done. So tell us a bit about you, man.
In a nutshell, one of the, like it's funny because you're not the first person to tell me that they were just like, this teacher's gonna have no idea how the system works.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I get it. I get it because you almost want people who are elected to have the experience specifically with this. My experience was different. My experience that I came into is I'm a systems thinker, right? And that's why I was a teacher. As I looked at how do I change the systems that impact young people, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna join the system of education, right? It wasn't always about I just love English, I love social studies. It was of systems. It's like this is a system that can affect change. That's how I viewed council. In the same way where I was like, let me analyze the structure, figure out what levers we can pull to create the change that I wanted to see in community that helped me growing up. So I ran for council because I was like, you might make people think I'm a teacher. Many people used to call me, they used to denigrate me and say he's a phys ed teacher. And I was like, I don't teach gym. I'm not no hate to gym teachers, but I was like, I was like, why are we hating? But I am a systems thinker. And so council was just a new system with different levers to pull that were gonna create some change that I wanted to see.
Yeah, and I mean, I have the utmost respect for counselors because I've had an opportunity to work with them firsthand. I know how demanding those jobs can be. So irrespective of where you sit on the political sphere or, realm, for me, it's always like if someone's willing to run, that says something about them to me. And all the talk about career politicians and everything happening in the world. Today, I feel it's harder now than ever to be in this position.
Yeah, it's a weird place right now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
The simplest things are political.
Yeah.
Which is what we're going to talk about.
100%. Yeah. So, Courtney, tell us a bit about your background, though, pre-politics. Tell us about your livelihood, how you grew up, what it was like for you as a kid.
Well, one of the, it almost sounds cliche when you tell the story, right? But you grow up in affordable housing, you're gonna hear a lot of people talk about that over the course of their lives, and they're gonna talk about how significant, affordable housing was to actually making sure that we had that social safety net that allowed them to find the next opportunity. That's my story, right? I grew up in places where if I didn't have subsidized rent, I didn't know where it'd be. Whether it was from a townhouse in Brendan Way in Scarborough, or if it was in Thunder Grove on McCowan and Finch. It was like these places were all subsidized units that my single mom, my 2 sisters, that we could be in. And what that gave me was something simple. It just allowed me the freedom to think about other things.
Yeah.
And I remember the stress of getting evicted, of moving different places and trying to find somewhere where you could be secure. And it wasn't me, it was my mom. I look at my mom and I think about all the different opportunities that were withheld from her because of the stress that she was going through to keep a roof over our head. Any job will do as long as we're fed. I'll never forget those feelings. Yeah. Just think about how all the families that are out there that are undergoing the same thing right now because they don't have that same social safety net that my family was offered for a period in my life.
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that, man, because I only lived a short amount of my life in established areas, but it was so incredibly impactful, and I never understood why. Yeah. And I remember when we moved to Coral Springs that changed for me, because it wasn't that anymore. Like my parents said that it was going to be amazing. We had this lake.
Do you have a front driveway?
Yeah, of course. Like I shut all that for everybody to just like experience the differences of what it felt like. And I didn't know any of this about how it transformed my life until I could like be an adult, realize that like there was this changed me as a fundamental human being, even though it was only for a short period of my life.
When I moved here, I moved to Hidden Valley with my dad. Front garage. You couldn't see my front door from the street. We knew a couple of the kids, but if it was the transition. When one family moved out, it's so hard to get to know the next one, right? Because there's no natural interactions. You drive into the garage, you close that door, you go into the house. People barely even use the front door. I mean, like the thing that I'm hearing, and so correct me if I'm wrong, and this is something that like my observation has always been, is that the cultural landscape that designed these communities was always about, my little Idaho, right? Like this is my piece of land, white picket fence, don't cross my property line.
Yeah.
The community's the community, but there are community centers, there are community anchors, the parks and stuff, but my house is my house.
Yeah.
That attitude created these neighborhoods that everyone was separate and everyone was isolated. They had their families and that was it. Yeah. The thing that sticks in my mind is culture. So I have this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that helps me understand policy. Culture creates policy, and then policy creates culture. And this circle goes on for forever and ever until someone intervenes to one or the other. A new cultural understanding or a policy to shift the culture. Like one of those things has to happen. But until it does, culture creates policy, policy creates culture, and it just like circles and circles and circles. Yeah. So think about like what we described about those homes. No one's a villain. They had a nuclear family. Everyone had 4 or 5 kids. You needed that big place. You needed a backyard because you have 4 or 5 kids, 2 parents. They're going to be there for their entire life. They're going to grow up. And so that's the culture. It created the policy, the planning, the rationale, the textbooks, the architects, everybody who's the engineers. They're building based off of a policy that's reflective of their world at that time. And then those policies became the standard, and they duplicated the culture of having large pieces of land for big families. The only difference is a bunch of things interacted with the culture, whether or not it's inflation and the need to go from a single income household to a 2-income household, working parents means less kids means you don't need the big space. And so that was like, it's not malicious, it's just the world changed. The culture changed, but we had already created the infrastructure for a culture that was changing, it was shifting. And what we're doing right now, in my opinion, is we're catching up, is that the culture changed. So now we have to change the policy to match the modern place that we're in. But the reality is 50 years from now, our culture is going to change again, and someone's going to have to readjust the policy, and that should be a natural evolution of your community.
This is a great segue because we talk about this intervention. You get elected, you come on a council, it's a crash course. Yeah. You're not just dealing with housing, you're dealing with everything. Yeah. But housing seemed to be the thing that used to hit you in the face the most based on, the ward that you represent, where it's positioned, and the amount of growth and intensity that was happening in that ward. So talk a little bit about your ward, your experiences early days, and then we could talk about, what drove you to this intervention.
When I got elected, a lot of developments happening in my area. And I think a lot of the conversation in the inner city, in the Beltline, in Altadore, Marta Loop, Killarney, Bankview, all of these areas that we're seeing a lot of the change. The political conversation while I was campaigning was the developers are getting what they want. Mm-hmm. And I was always struck by that because I was like, it was a very one-sided presentation, right? It was like, absolutely, developers are going to make some money off of this, 100%. It's a business, they're selling it. The thing that struck me always is that when I was talking to people, I would always ask them, I was like, well, if you were in the same position eventually and you want the same thing. And they'd be like, what do you mean? And they'd be like, well, when you go to sell your house, you're going to try and sell it for a profit, right? They would often say yes, reluctantly sometimes. And no one would ever really say that anyone was going to take the self-sacrifice of selling their home for what they bought it for, when they bought it, just to keep the market low. Everyone was in it for some degree of profit. That was the moment when I was campaigning, when I was like, I need to stop looking at this as good and bad, and I just need to look at this as an economic system. How does the fact that we treat housing as an economic system and all the policies that are associated with treat it as an economic system change the way that we live our lives, change the outcomes that we have for our citizens? Because really, all I care about is I want some kids, because I was a teacher, I want my kids, the next generation, to be happy and housed. Because what I know is this: if you get that one, like I said, I grew up in affordable housing. If you get that one foundational building block set in place, everything else after that, they can just build on top of it. But if you don't even let the ground stabilize, they don't have a chance to build anything. That's housing. And so I hear people complain, I would hear it, but I couldn't get away from the fact that it seemed like everybody was treating the system the same way, from homeowners to private developers. Everybody was treating it the same way. And it was actually just the people who didn't have a home yet that were suffering, and the people who wanted to get a home in the future that were suffering. Renters were suffering. So I need to change the economic system. So middle, to me, it's less about, like, I can make a huge argument about the culture that it creates, the connectivity, age and place. I can make all those questions. But it came down to the fact that it made the dollars make sense for another generation to have an opportunity at housing.
I'm gonna fast forward a bunch. I know you did a bunch of other things, but like for me, the Housing Task Force had emerged. COVID obviously had put us in this precipice of like, what is happening with housing? Yeah. Things were going insane. The crisis continued to be socialized, almost normalized. And I felt like this was kind of like a big pivotal moment for you. Walk us through that.
I can't pretend that the housing crisis hitting home in 2023 wasn't a supportive boon to the policy work that I was doing, right? But the reality is like, so in Calgary in particular, Canada-wide, nationally, the housing crisis didn't hit the national consciousness until late 2023, right? Like, people were still understanding, people were still looking at housing. They really hadn't quite come to terms with the fact that most people were struggling, right? So 2023, that's when it really hit. The numbers started to show up. People started to pay attention. People were all of a sudden started watching. I think it was June 6th was when the report got all the way to committee at council, and that was the report that was just like, go big or go home, right? That was essentially what that report said.
98 recommendations.
Yeah, it was a hefty report, and it went in. I remember I had conversations with everybody involved with this, and I was like, you need to look at this as a spectrum. We have spent so much time talking about affordable housing, but affordable housing is a waste of your time if the market is spiraling out of control. So I kept having that conversation over and over again with people. I was like, the affordable housing crisis has easy solutions. Build more, clean, sustainable subsidies, land, right, money, you're good.
Yeah.
The market, on the other hand, was policy driven.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was like, need to look at all the policies. So all of these things were like, okay, here's the affordable housing money, but let's talk about all the policies that we have are in control about regulating the housing market. And that's why you were interested in one of those, and I was interested in all of them, because I was like, no, let's talk. We got a whole spectrum. Let's hit every single point on that spectrum.
Yeah.
Let's go all in.
Yeah.
People used to say that it's like throwing everything at the wall.
Yeah.
And I used to hate when people say that, because they didn't realize how precise these shots were. This wasn't spaghetti. It wasn't throwing every solution at the wall. It was actually just identifying that there's 98 problems and 98 solutions. So here we go.
Yeah.
And it failed.
Yeah.
It lost because of one rezoning missing middle policy. All of my colleagues who voted against it acknowledged that the plan was great.
Yeah.
But we can't support it if it says this one thing.
I disagree with what they're doing.
It's the largest public hearing in Calgary's history.
Blanket rezoning is a very bad idea without considering how that's going to impact the future.
It's not addressing the housing crisis, so to speak. It's just become an open door for developers.
And the backlash that came overnight from community that was like, are you joking?
Yeah.
Like, we can't afford to live in this city, and you're worried about the fact that you might have 3 neighbors. That's the reason why you're going to turn down an entire housing affordability task force report. Next day, Councilor Pootmans reconsidered it in council. It goes through, fast forward to the housing strategy, fast forward to rezoning. We're a year ago right now, I was still in that public hearing on rezoning.
Yeah, yeah.
And it all went through.
I got 98 problems and rezoning's the one.
Rezoning's just one, right?
Yeah, and so like, I think like, this is like where I wanted to get in it with you. I guess what I'm interested in as folks continue to look at this across North America, like how do you could have easily just pulled that out, got 97 things in. To be completely honest, Courtney, I don't know if this one is gonna be the one that makes the biggest difference anyways. Like, let's be honest, where gentle density is beautiful because of how it's gentle and how it enters the market. Why do you think it was so important that this stayed a part of that entire strategy?
When I said to you earlier that, you know, anyone who paid attention to the numbers knew that this problem existed 20 years ago, 40 years ago, and we've just been watching the numbers escalate, I want you to just fast forward 20 years. If the one thing that we refuse to change is the policy that actually determines what houses can be built, and we don't open that up at every level, I know we're focusing on middle, but I mean at every level, if you don't open up what types of housing can be built, it's not the 500 units that get built this year or the 2,000 units that get built next year. It's not that. It's the fact that cumulative, over the next 20 years, 500,000 units might not get built in a city growing to multiple million people. And those will be in apartments. Some of those will be in greenfield suburbs. Some of those will be row houses, established areas, basement suites, backyard suites. Some of those will be all different types, stacked units, all the creativity that's out there. It's that cumulative failure of the past in building houses to an appropriate level that we witnessed that brought us into this crisis. So if we compromise on the smallest thing, what's the point? What's the point of me giving you money? What's the point of spending capital projects or giving land away or doing whatever? What's the point of any of it if at the end of the day, the one thing we're not gonna do is let people build houses?
Well, let me even challenge you a little bit as you think about this, because what I think you achieved by doing that and staying with it is you did what you said before, is you wanted to break the culture. And in order to augment where we were going, although it wasn't going to be the thing that produced the most amount of housing, it may not give you the capital A affordability that everyone wanted to throw around. Courtney said, Councilor Walcott said that it was going to.
He was going to solve everything.
Yeah,
I didn't.
I said that these were going to be
I
affordable.
said 98 things together will solve this.
Yes. But like, what we continue to run into is fear. What do you think enabled that to happen? Of the fear of, okay, a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, an eightplex, whatever it is beside me, in the form category that is in, will not ruin neighborhoods or lives.
I'll paint a simple picture, right? When I look at where I want to live, you got to always start with yourself. Start with your family, start with your life story, start with yourself, where I want to live. I can't afford a single detached house. I'm a city councilor. I can't afford a single detached house. I need a dual income. And if that still, with the student loans that I have, like I had a hard time buying a row house that I have now. I could barely afford to live in this place that I'm in right now. It's crazy to me. I'm a city councilor. What? So point being here is that the reason why I can't find a ground-oriented unit, to use the professional language, why I can't find a ground-oriented is because there aren't any. They're scarce. You're either a single detached or a duplex. And a single detached right now is over $1 million. A duplex is closing in on $1 million. And row houses are closing in on $600,000, $700,000 in the inner city. And that's on a pure number of scarcity. There's just not enough. So I know everyone wants to say, oh, like, what is it about? We're changing our communities and we're changing this. But that one thing, that one rule, all I could really ever get away is that a family who wants a small backyard, who wants to live in community, they're either going to have to be rich or they're going to have to live in an apartment. You're right, I could have took it out. You're right, and I could have let the scarcity continue. But at a certain point, you got to ask the question of, are you going to give the next generation an opportunity to live on the ground?
My lived experience is this, like the whole reason why I'm doing what I'm doing right now is because of this whole thing. It's like, for me, middle housing is about middle people.
Yeah.
It's about people who worked really hard to earn their home. And now they are aging out of place, and they are not sure where they exist in their communities, and they don't understand how this could be for them, their children, their community, their future neighbors. And I know that through my lived experience. Like, I've bought enough 50 of these single family homes from people who aged out of place, who passed away, whose kids took it on. And I don't think any of those people ever could imagine that they could have done this for themselves. And I think that is one of the things that I'm like consistently trying to shift people's mindset is, you can do this. You owning this and acquiring it when you did, like you just said, is really the opportunity. So we need to simplify the system so more people can get involved. And that's the beautiful thing about this thing.
You know, you probably heard, you know, everybody knows the analogy about how you're way closer to being poor than you are to being rich, right? You're way, way closer to being poor than you are to being rich. And so let me like spell out that scenario for you.
Unpack that a little bit.
Right, like, I buy a house in so I'm door knocking in Altadore, right? I'll give you a very specific example. Altadore is a community in Ward 8. I'm door knocking in Altadore. I meet a woman. She says, you know what? I hate that my taxes are going up, right? And I ask her, and I'm like, oh, yeah, everybody hates their taxes going up. And I did something that I regret. This is early in my door knocking days. I don't really know how I'd handle this conversation anymore. I was like, how much is your house worth? I was curious. I was like, because it's an old bungalow, right? And she's like, my taxes are always going up. And I was like, oh, like, how much is your house worth? Like, this is huge, 50 by 125 or something like that. Like, it was a massive lot. And she's like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we started talking, and I was grateful that she didn't, like, slam the door in my face, because I shouldn't have asked that question. It's intrusive. And so we keep talking, and she just was talking about how she bought into the community. She bought the house. She bought the house at an affordable price for her and her family, relative to like their income. It was really a generic story of 2-income household, bought this house, had kids, lived here my whole life. Now I live by myself, and I can't afford it anymore. I can't afford to live in my own bungalow anymore because my taxes are going up. And I had to ask her, I was like, you know, your taxes are just tied to how much your house is worth, right? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, your house is just worth a lot of money, and taxes are just tied to your asset value. And she was just struck by the fact that I was like, yeah, you're just sitting on cash, and we're just taxing your cash essentially, right? And that's a flawed system, by the way. Yeah. It's a broken system. But where we got to, I asked her a question. I was like, you know, like, if you and your family wanted to move into your own house right now, like if you live somewhere else and you want to move in here, could you? And we got to a place where she was like, I can't afford this house based off of how much it's worth. So I said this earlier, so I asked her the question. I was like, so would you sell to a young family for half the value of your house just to allow them to move into this neighborhood? And she said no so fast. She's like, no, I'm going to sell this house for what it's worth. And then I'm like, your community has already changed, because your community is now a community of people who sit on $1 million assets. When you bought in here, you bought in a middle-class community. And that was a weird conversation to say to someone who is a middle-class person, and then you kind of look around and you see these massive new developments going up, huge $2 million duplexes, single detached homes, concrete structures, architectures designed. And she's looking, and I was like, your community already changed. You know, a row house isn't gonna, or all the row house is gonna do in this neighborhood, it's gonna allow someone like you to still be here.
Calgary has been one of the most progressive cities in North America in terms of its missing middle housing production. Like, we had the right mix of circumstances that had led to, even prior to citywide rezoning, like, things were moving. And that's why I think Calgary was so hot and so controversial versus other cities. It's because we had been through it. We had seen all the examples, both good and bad, of what we liked and didn't like. And it was growing, and it was making a meaningful difference, which was looked at as a negative thing for so many people.
When I think about the 98 actions and everything it was included in them, because there are sub-actions. When I think about them, I always put myself on I always think about like a spider web of the solution, right? Every solution to every problem is kind of a network, and I always just put it in a spider web. Find yourself on the web, right? Is that when you do this well and you design a solution well, every person who's involved in an industry and society and culture and community, when you have a problem that affects everybody, that means that everybody's got to be part of the solution. And so when you look at this network, this web of a solution, 98 actions spread out across the problem, I don't need you to solve everything. That's why I don't, when you say like, I only know one, that's because that's your one.
Yeah.
Right? I need you to find your one, and I need you to do your one so well. And I say, go run with that. Because I have 97 other people that I need to say the exact same. You need to go do your one.
Cool.
And if everybody just does their one thing, this system starts to shift.
Yeah.
When everybody focuses on one thing, though, when everyone singularly focuses on one issue, one part of the solution, and ignores the rest, that's when things get backlogged. And that's what I experienced a little bit with rezoning, is that people were willing to let the entire web go up in flame because they couldn't get past the fact that they wanted to be involved in one of the things that wasn't theirs.
Yeah, well, I feel like hopefully you inspired a bunch of people to run, but now you're leaving us as like a champion. So like a one term and done. And I know, I don't think that was the original plan, but like.
No, it was the original plan.
Was it always one and done? Is what you had always thought about?
Yeah, my belief in a second term was always contingent on, could I get my list done?
Got it. Good. So yeah, unpack this. So you feel like you've come and done what you needed to do, and I wouldn't disagree.
Yeah, I did. I honestly do. Like, there's always going to be stuff.
There's always work to be done.
There's always work to be done, right? And like, that's important.
Yeah.
But it's like it's everything I just said, but like really pinpointed now. When you have one thing to do, go do that thing. Focus on that thing. I recognize that I had some capacity in my life from democratic, from political capital, that I could invest into creating at least a place that empowered people to do their part in the solution. That's what I did. I'm not saying it's going to work. What I'm saying is that no one in City Hall, no one in industry can give me an excuse anymore that for the most part, I have empowered people to make the decision. I'm not saying everybody's going to make the decision, but that is the role of council. The role of council is not to force you to make the choice. The role of council is to make sure that you have the power to make the choice. Technically, I gave myself the power to make that choice, and I'm gonna go make it. And I'm gonna go use that. I'm gonna go use that energy out there, and then one day I'll end up back in the classroom because I love teaching.
Yeah, and I love that you've kind of joined as a housing kind of advocate and warrior. I think it's super impactful. Yeah. And yeah, man, it was a great conversation. Super stoked to have you on here to tell your story and obviously the impact that you've had on middle housing here. And we're gonna let's go hit the community a little bit and show people what the fabric looks like and how communities are changing, and get to see a little bit of that conversation on the street.
Cool.
Sweet. Historic row house, obviously built for affordable housing, a lot of these older places, but like here we come, it's vibrant, there's kids running already, like dudes washing cars, like, this is what I feel like we're missing. And you were just talking about like how difficult it might be to actually do this again.
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons why you build a housing form like this is because by nature of just land economics, this is more affordable. So whether or not it's market or non-market, this is actually just like an efficient use of land, right? And so when I look around, it's like, imagine trying to build this again in the same way. Look at all the space that we're using, the lawns. Trying to build this one more time, the price is gonna go up.
Yeah.
But think about the alternative. Because like that's the space that I end up having a conversation with a lot of people, is they're like, is it really truly affordable to do this if it's market housing versus non-market? And my answer is always simple, is like, okay, like, if you're gonna put $2 million home on a piece of land, or you're gonna put $400,000 or $500,000, which do you have better access to?
100%. We're talking accessibility, right? Like not accessibility like wheelchair accessibility, but access to like what does it take to get into a community. And like for me, like yes, this is obviously an affordable housing project. It's one of the most in demand, and as a board member, which you sit on as well, we both know how in demand family oriented housing is. And that's the thing I think most people forget. Like, you said this, the most efficient thing to build is a 1-bedroom unit. It's to stack it, make sure all the runs make sense. It's to get the most amount of density. The challenge with that is we lose housing diversity. Yeah. So where do our families go?
Where do the families go, especially when you're getting people from different places around the world? Yeah. Different cultures who still have that larger family model that many Western cultures are actually losing.
Yeah.
When you got 3, 4, 5 kids, when you want to be in these spaces, when you want families, multi-generational families to be in here, you need the bedrooms.
Yeah.
You need communal living spaces, or you need communal community spaces outside of the home so that people can find a place. And that's why we're talking about the people playing on the street.
Yeah. And like, I think there's just a mistake like, oh, a family needs to have 2,000 square feet. Like, these places are 1,000 square feet, maybe 1,200 on their largest. So it's not like they're massive units.
Nope.
But the fabric of the community, the connection actually transpires in different places. It almost like encourages you to go out on your front door and to have that connection because it's like, yo, you don't have a 2,000 square foot backyard.
I always think about the that classic argument that people want is like, when you think about parks, you know what everyone's favorite park is? Their backyard, right? And that sucks because no one else is allowed in there. You're alone, you're isolated, you're individual. And now a lot of people want that privacy of it though. What happens when you actually make sure that someone's park, their backyard, is the community park? You meet people, you share space, you break bread together, because if you design it to force people to come together, they will.
People are like, oh, my whole community is gonna be this. It's like, no, it's not gonna be that. Like, everyone has different preferences in terms of how they wanna live. I mean, I think like part of the idea of like the projects or affordable housing being centralized is that we're putting a bunch of people in the same place and centralizing the problem when we can put them throughout community. And it's what I love about communities like Bridgeland and Calgary is because it's so diverse in terms of the housing mix, typology, demographic, the people that it serves.
You said something I want to limit too. Even like you said, you centralize the problem. Every community that is homogenous has a problem.
100%.
When you look at wealthy communities and communities that have this massive, what you have is an experience of huge isolation. Right, and you see that to be such a common thesis amongst communities of single detached homes, big yards, but single people. There's a sense of isolation that's stuck in there, and I bet you every time you speak to someone who's grown up in their home for a long time, their biggest anchor to community was the people they lived with. And so when people start to move out, is there a community waiting for you? Is there a community waiting for you for that isolation? Here, it's the opposite, of course, right? You have that opposite problem. So what's really important is that it's not about centralizing the problem. It's eliminating diversity. Right? By eliminating diversity from any community you build, you prevent people from growing together in a fulsome community because you make it homogenous, you make it one thing, but a good community is more than one thing.
And like, you know, you and I were talking about it again, like, not only do kids play in the streets, but like when I look around, you know, Shag, the thing that I've always loved about this housing, like, there's mature trees. There was a playground. We just walked by the basketball court. Like, there's eyes on the doors, like, and there's eyes on the streets. And so, like, what do you think all this was done with intent? Like, or do you think they just like, you know, how did some of this manifest from your perspective? And have we lost something through this process?
It's definitely intentional. When you look at what's needed out here, and when you're thinking about it, these types of communities were built with a good understanding of the people who are going to live here. When you produce any type of housing developments where you know there's going to be lots of kids, then you need to make sure they're safe. You need to find out and you make sure that you got a park nearby, right? This can only happen though at this scale with the amount of land that they have, right? It's about the space. When you're doing one-off developments, right, and you would know this better than anything, you target where you're gonna put a multifamily unit based off of the amenities of the neighborhood. 100%. Do they have a park? Is there a bike path? Is there like restaurants, a place for them to go eat, walk? When you have a piece of land this large, I don't need to actually look out to the community because I can build those amenities inside to this place. And so when you get a basketball court, when the playground behind these homes, they were done so intentionally so that this whole community is complete within itself. Right?
Yeah, cool, man. Let's go walk over to seeing what like some of the newer examples of this housing form and how it takes place within existing communities.
Absolutely.
So we just came from obviously Shaganappy, like Calgary housing, affordable housing, but like cool middle housing, good infrastructure, and now we're here like right across from the Westbrook LRT, and we're starting to see a lot of this kind of courtyard style middle housing starting to transpire. And I was just talking about how like it's so interesting to look at like the evolution of the established neighborhoods. Because you see all the bungalows, and I remember when even doing like duplexes was so controversial.
Yep.
And now this is the thing, that's kind of thing. But like, there's so much beauty in the natural, organic changes that we see in these communities. And obviously, you and I both know Mike, who is, the CA lead here. Mike has been a huge advocate for his community and the change.
Absolutely.
And so talk to me about what do you see here that inspires you?
One of the most important things about this that I love, and also I'm always afraid of, is when you look at this row, right? You see this roadway right here, it's noisy. For a long time, when you were proposing a missing middle project, the city would kind of push you to this place.
To the corners,
They push you to the corners.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let you, then they say, this is where it should go. Now, so you're looking at what that means, right, is you get a compromise. It's still not perfect because people still didn't know what it was. They weren't sure they were going to accept it. They weren't sure they were going to love it. So you push it to the corners. But what I'll say is this. Each one of these that's been built is a community unto itself, right? And so every single time you build one, you get 10 different families, 5 different families, 8 different families, and they come and they live in this space and they share space together by construction.
Yeah.
When people start to get used to that idea, I can't wait till that starts becoming more common, not just on the corners.
Yeah.
That's what rezoning was about, was to give that flexibility, but it doesn't always have to be out here. When it's done right, it's gonna be in there and you're not even gonna know it's there.
It's funny because I think naturally, that's how, you see progress. Practice makes progress is what my daughter talks about all the time now, my 6-year-old. But it's like, you start to see what it's like when it lands, and you realize no, actually, it's not that bad. But the whole idea of planning on the peripherals has always been flawed to me. And we've done it in every community, thinking that's the way we should build, and that's part of this cultural change. That now, the beauty of saying, equitably, all of us can create what we want on our homes is what I'm super excited about.
Well, I think the idea that we need to wall off our communities with the change on the outside and then whatever was there on the inside before and keep it there, when it's no, I want a piecemeal everywhere a little bit.
Yeah.
I want my community to be defined by the people that live in it.
Yeah.
And not by just the way it was built in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah. And I was just saying, as we let's walk over here and you see this, this is what infill was and has been. And so it's funny because all of these would have been those bungalows that we talk about.
Absolutely.
And you can see to me, what's so beautiful about this is we get this exact mix, right?
Yeah.
You have these great homes that were built here for families who felt like this is what they wanted. Yeah. And then you have these older bungalows here on these corners. And then we start to see kind of how the missing middle blends also in here. Yeah. And so it's really amazing how we start to see a good mix of different things. Life comes full circle. These strawberry boxes were built at speed, rapidly.
So how fast can we put this up here?
How fast can we produce this amount of housing for, veterans coming home from the war and for these families that were growing? And it's we're in this interesting precipice again. And I think the irony of it is the very homes we built quickly to serve a function and a purpose are the very opportunities that we see today. And it's interesting, you look across the street here, it's it's hard to even tell, is
that's
that
2 homes?
Yeah, is that 2? Is it 4? Is it 8? And then, a bungalow and then duplexes. And so the reality is our neighborhoods are changing, like you said, Courtney, in front of us. I guess, when you get asked, how do you get it right? What does that look like?
I think the answer is that we never got it right, and we're never going to get it right because it doesn't exist. It's just iterative. Your community grows and it changes, and you have to grow and change with it because that's just who we are as people. That's who you are as a community. It's who you are as a society. I think it's the actual opposite. It's that belief that somehow what is here now is right. That's the mindset that gets in the way of all these different things. And I think that's the mindset that creates some of the more financial challenges we see with building housing, is that people think that just because what is what has to be. But for me, it's no, because at the time that this was built, this was controversial too. And it's so change is the norm. Stagnation is the problem. And so I never say you can't get it right. You just have to be willing to evolve.
Yeah.
That's how your community survives. That's how your community thrives. It's when you're willing to evolve with whatever happens.
Yeah.
Because
man, I so appreciate your time in this conversation, and I'm excited to follow you on your next journey and what comes next, man. I'm stoked, and I appreciate and grateful for all your good work. Yeah, super appreciative. And yeah, if you had to leave us with any last words, man, like as we continue to figure out how middle scales, like, and we can continue the good work, obviously, in the city and the country, like, what would you leave us with some parting words?
You know, it's something I said earlier, right? I think I don't need everyone to fix the problem. I just need everyone to do one part in the broader solution. And middle housing, that's it, right? Like, so if you're sitting on a piece of land and you think to yourself, I can house a few families with me, do it. That's what middle is all about. That's about diversifying our housing stock. That's about community. And so build that community one house at a time.